Onegaishimasu. Welcome back to the Goju Ryu Karate Center. We're going to work on Fukyu Bunkai, some basic ideas and ideas you can work with. Remember, Kihon and foundation is built in layers and later on will become synonymous with normal types of combat. Obviously, there can be a tangent that goes to sport line, there can be a tangent that goes to maybe fighting in a cage or octagon, and there is definitely a tangent that goes somewhere to the street. Everything requires adaptation. So nothing is cast in stone that it's going to work 100% of the time. There's no such thing. Just a run-of-the-mill, regular, common sense disclaimer for all the guys out there who seem to think that there's only one answer. Okay, cool. Let's go, Brian. Right, so our first idea is get on Baraya and punch, and Brian grabs onto my hand, and all I'm going to do is pull across, block, and punch. Okay, so grab on the other hand, I'm going to pull across, block, and punch. The blocking motion is a little bit more aggressive, so if he grabs on and I'm bringing my hand across, I'm already starting to ease the grip, and then I'm not chopping down on the arm, but I'm chopping across the arm and creating that clearance. So now I can hit ribs or hit face. Now this is very rudimentary, very primitive, because I'm not moving, I'm not doing very much, and Brian is only using one attack. So he's grabbing on, I'm going like this, blocking and punching. Now, if we escalate it, that Brian is grabbing on and he is punching, I'm blocking, and dealing with the problem. Okay, so pick an arm, Brian, go for it. So 1, 2. Why would you let go? So I'm doing this, I'm using this to block. Obviously that hand is ready to come again, but we have now got the idea of where a triple punch would fit in. He starts to block, and then I find holes in his defense and whack him. It's that simple. So he picks a hand, he does this, I move. Now the moment I move, now I start taking on a stance, and now I'm starting to move in. And so we can see immediately an idea for the first two directions and an idea for the third direction, where we're just simply blocking, striking, breaking out, and it's not necessarily that is the blocking technique. Now, some weeks ago, somebody posted a comment that there's no such thing as a block in karate. The general terminology we all generally use is block. But yes, he was 100% correct to say you are receiving his technique. Most people don't understand this because every textbook and every manual and every piece of virtual basic information that is out there for a youngster to glean and look at says that this is a face block, this is a chest block, this is a stomach block. All right? I'm absorbing his techniques and I'm retaliating. Okay? I'm receiving and then giving back. Okay? So Brian is grabbing on and he's now attacking, and I'm blocking, striking, and now hitting. So now we're starting to change the idea. So if he grabs on and he hits, and I move in, strike, strike. And again, we're still keeping this very, very simple. All right, we haven't taken it to the idea of a flow drill and something that is a little bit more pragmatic. It's still very much Kihon, but we are building the ideas that we can use, okay, as we go along. Let's escalate it. So now we're going to change the nature of the attack. So Brian, you're going to take a kamae because we're still going to do something that resembles classical karate. So pick a leg and to go back into some kind of kamae. And Brian is going to punch for my belly button or my groin, preferably my groin. And I'm now going to do what would be typical long distance photographic textbook nice bunkai. So he attacks low, I block, match feet, and I retaliate with what appears to be a low punch because he's in a low stance. This punch becomes a throat punch. Okay, so when he attacks, 1, I can also go to the other side. This would be typical, hey, thanks Brian. This would be typical kind of application that works on the idea of what people would like to see in gradings, in testing, and what you would go through systematically to build into your foundation. Now, I have a mate out there who likes to work everything. He hates this stuff. He keeps telling me, why are you wasting your time? But there's a large number of people who like this format. And his idea that he likes to work from kakie. He's like, everything should come from that initial contact point. So we're going to now take those exact same movements and we'll work from that initial contact point. Let's go, Brian. Okay, so if we're doing kakie, or at this point of contact where there's engagement, now there is either pushing down. If Brian pushes my hand down and now starts to punch, I have to deal with this technique that is coming. Now, I can block and I can punch, but I can also, as he starts to push down, I can redirect. And this first portion here is what's going to work for me. Now, I'm going to bring my hand up on the inside, but I'm going to strike for the groin and then move in and retaliate. So I'm starting to get this idea of this kind of position. And so if we're doing kakie, I've done this a couple of times in a couple of different videos, and Brian starts to press and then to attack, I'm using the same hand to block and then attack and attack. And it could come from any number of kata. And it generally does work in a very nice way. Other ideas we can work on. All right, I'm going to take Brian's arm and I'm going to pull his arm and bring it around and I'm going to pull him down. So now I've changed his position. And this is 1, 2, 3. Let's use your other arm, please, Brian. So 1, the upper part of Gedambarai. 2, bringing it around, continuing around. 3, now I've changed the position. Now we can deliver. And I've also moved away from his strong hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn as I do it. And we've changed the direction of the fight. So here we have that idea of low block and medium or lowish type punches to work more effectively. So this is a little bit more pragmatic and it's lending itself to a little bit more of a practical idea. If I'm standing up and Brian suddenly kicks down or kicks for my groin, so it's a low, this kind of idea, very similar to the guys who do koikishin, where they'll stand and as the kicks come, they'll either block with the leg or if it's maybe even if it's a roundhouse kick, okay, short roundhouse kick coming in, just blocking and hitting, this kind of idea. Again, this is a different kind of bunkai for a different group of people who tend to be watching our channel, where you're just blocking and punching. I used to love Fukyu kata because for me, it was such a nice way to teach basics. Somebody along the lines of a little bit more old school kind of Wuko or WKF style fighting. Yes, I'm allowed to use the term Wuko, not that I'm affiliated to them. I'm just talking a time frame. So like late 1990s for me, early noughties, etc. So if we're fighting and we're in this kind of distance and there is that Chidan Muashi, it was very, very popular. So kicking for the ribs. So as that kick comes, closing and just blocking and hitting. This is kind of like the first idea here. Or when you get to see Fukyu kata Dai San, you start seeing these motions, then it starts to fill parts of the puzzle as to what we did to become relatively proficient at sport karate. And in doing so, actually make a bit of a name for ourselves within our community, within our region. And that in turn was good for the growth and stabilization of our dojo because there was a certain interest. Since then, we've subsequently kind of toned down what we do in terms of the sporting facet, and we're focused more on teaching the more classical type karate and making videos to try and make a difference to people's lives. So just that opening move, block punch, really, really useful. Okay, so Brian, I'm just going to do a little bit. So we've pretty much covered that, covered the idea of multiple punches. Now turn, block, high block. So gedan barai, jodan uke, gedan barai, jodan uke, or age uke, whatever term you would like to use for it. A low receiving technique and a high receiving technique. Now, if you watch a video that we produced called 8 Ideas, 1 Technique, we played with the idea of taking a age uke or a jodan uke, this kind of technique, and breaking it down into a couple of different ideas. And you combine that with receiving and absorbing with this. And if you watch the hands, they're basically round circular type movements, where you're trying to knock the arm or the limb out the way, maybe rolling around and grabbing and snaring on, and then using the other hand to deliver some kind of blow with the forearm, the elbow, the uppercut. Then it starts becoming a little bit more interesting. Hey, Brian. So, again, looking at it from a more kind of basic idea, I give Brian my hand. If I go around, I clear, I pull, and now this hand coming up. Maybe I'm deciding to do something on the nose and the mouth. Maybe Brian grab across the line, I think. All right, so maybe I'm coming around this way, and now I'm moving in, and I'm doing the forearm or the uppercut. Okay, the uppercut in the rising technique, the rising block. Maybe I'm doing that. Maybe the idea is Brian grabs an arm, and I'm blocking, and I'm pulling, and maybe for some or other reason, I get myself to a position where I might be behind him and I'm lifting his head, his mouth, attacking his legs. Maybe I'm holding on this side, this hand, excuse me, Mike, this hand pulling, this hand up and lifting. These are all ideas from a face block, from a high receiving technique that you might be applying. Maybe Brian is grabbing on and I'm pulling and I'm breaking the elbow. Here's the hand on top. There's the elbow strike behind, or I'm cranking and trying to throw. And because I'm doing this, his easiest thing to do is just try step off and go there. And now he attacks either low or high. And again, we can move on where I can attack and attack or attack, grab. Oh, Brian, I forgot how nice. Oh, so nice. Oh, yeah. Where I can move to a point of control. And so the whole idea within this being a block and a block could very simply be he kicks my geri and I block and he does agyuke and I block. Yes, it could mean that. But you're left with nothing thereafter. Okay? So I tend to favor moving on and moving away. And for my mate who loves the kakie, when we get to this idea here, that I'm doing this, pulling, let me do this part here a little bit sooner. This, when I pull him down, you notice that whiplash. If I just move it here and I do this, I pull with one hand and whip him with the elbow on the other side. But the reality is the moment I go here, that other hand is coming, and so maybe I move to another place and we work to a different point of departure where I will cover, clear, and maybe we're using a punch to the throat or punch to the head or hyperextending the head, and we're getting to something a little bit more practical, a little bit more fun. Obviously, when I was doing a lot of sport karate, we would often have our fighting position, and if we worked on the idea that I might block low and then block high, should he punch first with the gyakuzuki and then step up and do roundhouse kick this side? So if he's punching one, I go one, he steps up. There's that low-high blocking technique. And this might be accompanied with some kind of retaliation if you're doing sport karate, you know. So he might go one, you might be trying to do this, and if he steps up two, go Moashigiri, come on, three, and okay, I hit his shoulder. But the idea, the principle is there that you're trying to counter in those movements. And so you could train it that it is block, punch, steps up, one, and maybe a uraken or uruchi, whatever you want to call it, where you're hitting and attacking with a whipping hand, a backhand, back for strike, might be put into play. All right? And that would work maybe for somebody who's doing a little bit more sport karate, maybe from those older style tournaments. I know that there are a few groups that still like those kind of movements. Maybe the WKF guys, there you've got to look at what is the flavor of the month and what's winning in a whole series of tournaments, and that's going to give you the idea of what's going to make you a champion. All right, again, with tournaments, we go back to our videos on tournament fighting, on kumite. The rules dictate what you do. So what I might be showing now might not be pertinent at all to a up-and-coming WKF style or WUKF style fighter who's fighting Shobo Ippon or Shobo Sanbon or just Shobo fighting for the 8-point lead. So we're just playing with those ideas. Gyakuzukis, just basic idea on the Gyakuzuki. And the thing that I used to love the most about Gyakuzuki was that Gyakuzuki kind of Gedambarai, Gyakuzuki, Gedambarai, Gyakuzuki. That idea just, oh man, such a good lead into hip throw. So the idea that if he hits Gyakuzuki and I block and I move in, this hand's already done the Gedambarai and trapped. It's created this little bit of float. This hand coming in, hitting, maybe I miss, and then I'm into this position, and now I'm into that kind of throwing, kind of hip placement that works a little bit better, and it allows you to get yourself into these kind of positions. Brian, let's just turn a little bit, come this way a little bit, there we go, thanks boy. So we're in this kind of position, that Gedambarai hooking on here, that punch or that Gyakuzuki going past, glancing past, but as it comes back, hooking on, you can see just this part here, just this helps give me that rotation. The moment I add my hip in here, all I have to do is a little bit of a pop. So if I bring this leg in, because we've broken it down a bit, and I give him a bit of a pop, he's just going to go over. All right. Good chances are, if you're a grappler out there, at that point you're saying, shoot for both legs, take him down, go to the fight, move to something else. And you're 100% right. And we definitely can go down that wormhole. We're not going to do it tonight. Surface is not really great for grappling on, but so it can lead to it. And I think that's the important thing, is that this series of kata are so fundamentally basic and yet so open, and there's so much you can draw on that makes a positive difference if you're willing to explore these kata. We finished the kata, the only variations that come out later on after the Gyakuzukis, turn and high punch, block and high punch, and I got told by somebody also that there is no face punch in Okinawan karate. It's a good thing that we're not answering just Okinawan karate questions, because I remember from when I was about 5 or 6 and I had my first boxing match, it was the one with the blood nose who lost the fight, and the one who didn't get a blood nose won the fight. And so you learned how to stick that little jab really quickly. So yeah, let's not overgeneralize that there is no such thing as a high punch. Okay, high punches, what would the purpose be? Well, one of the best things I love about a high punch, and this is something, I'm going to just tweak it, I'm going to make it into a reverse punch, but it is, if I punch this way on a horizontal area, it becomes very easy for Brian to block it. If I start punching towards his face, it becomes that little bit harder, especially if he's attacking. So if he's trying to hit me with a gyakuzuki, his entire energy, his intention is here. If you notice how much he's dropped, the straight punch is great, but if I catch him just before the time, it's that much. It's just that little bit harder because of the angle. And that's something I learned as I competed a little bit, that a rising punch that goes upward has got a huge benefit. Yeah, once guys start to pick it, then it leads to another advantage. So if Brian realizes the punch is coming high as he attacks and he blocks it, punch is coming high and he's there, so the punch is coming high, then all of a sudden I hit low and there's suddenly no defense. And this is part of the strategical game in these kind of short 1 point or 3 point or even a lead of 8 points types of kumite. In the reality of what we're doing, we may be up, there may be some kind of kick or something, and as he kicks, maybe it's around us, kick again. So we're looking at something about rib height, because if he's going to, change your legs please, Brian. If he's going to kick for my thigh, all right, so especially my friends who are doing full contact fighting, a lot of thigh kicks, so Brian's kicking into the thigh. My best solution is, as he's trying to kick for my thigh, yeah, started to pull out that one rather quickly here, Brian. So as he kicks for the thigh, this is one solution, especially for those low kicks. The next thing is he's kicking, go, it's that nasty shin, and even better than that, he kicks low, and now I'm blocking and I'm punching and I'm attacking a little bit high. And the nice thing about high techniques are where I can take them if I don't think of them as a punch. So again, Brian, we're in this position. Let me give you this leg again. You're going to kick for this leg. I'm going to basically use a high punch and I'm going to use it differently. So as Brian attacks, one, I'm here. This is high. Technically speaking, this is high. Now this makes my life so much nicer, don't you think? So sometimes the idea of a high technique can be useful, all right? Sometimes the idea is changing the angle of the fight and using his clothing against him. So he punches low, all right? I go 1, 2, pull, and now the fight has changed because all I've done is grabbed his lapel or the top of his jacket, his collar, his tie, given him a bit of a yank, and that whiplash combined with that might work or that might work. How's that feel, Brian? All right, so these are some of the ideas. Sometimes this is actually this. Okay, hey, Brian, thank you very much. So, Fukyu kata can be used and can be explored for a lot more than just the foundation, the fundamentals, the typical move, block, punch, or block kind of techniques, the idea of block, triple punch. It can also be grabbing, ensnaring, entangling arms, entangling limbs. It can be twisting, the idea of moving away from a technique, getting off of the line of attack, because the kata has got these big turning motions that are used to try and change the direction of the fight. It's not always head to head, because then the bigger and stronger fighter is going to be favored. And then changing the nature of how you see things. This is not just a punch, and this is not just a face block or a chest block or a stomach block. There's something more to it, and it is something that needs to be explored. So tonight we maybe touched on the idea that you may copy the kata and do it exactly as the school does, and this would be the shu phase. You maybe even learn application or bunkai or yoksuko kumite of some other form from the kata, and this is shu. You copy it directly from the school as and according to the principles of the school. At some point, if you're a serious karate practitioner, you will take what you have learned and you will take it apart for yourself. This is ha. You take it apart, you break each piece apart, you look at it, you analyze it. Do I do it forward? Do I do it backwards? There's a whole month's worth of karate in Fukyu Kata Daiichi. And the moment you add in the kick, you get another whole month's worth of kata. Ideas that can be kind of tweaked and twisted and turned around if you're doing Fukyu Kata Daini. In this case, I'm talking about the Goju version where we add maigiri in between all the turns. In other words, every time you step. And so it develops over time. And if you spend months and months and months just doing the Fukyu Kata and creating a foundation, you can build a fantastic foundation for various types of combat. Some of the ideas are fantastic. There's some grappling principles and grabbing and seizing and locking onto the person's arm, around, onto their lapel, onto their clothing, etc. And then just being a thug, grabbing on and just whacking the person. And if the punch is not on line, but the forearm kind of short clothesline is, then why not? Because maybe that's all you need to do to hyperextend that neck and to change the nature of the fight. I'm going to leave you with that. When you put it all together for yourself, by the way, you have completed the process called Shuhari. And the re component is where you kind of find it and make it your own. That is it for tonight. Thank you for joining us at the Goju Ryu Karate Center. As always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you very much for everybody's comments on the last video. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you'll see more of Brian. He is back from his escapades, running around, working around South Africa. And we'll be able to do a few more interesting videos that have bunkai and partner work, etc. Thanks again. Arigato gozaimasu. Come, Brian, please take a bow. Arigato gozaimasu. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.